All right, everyone. For those of you who are new to the community or you've been hiding under a rock, my new book, Design the Man Within, is out. And yes, it is available for purchase. I created this for the everyday man, the man who is the backbone to society, who puts in the long hours and the hard work and knows that there is something that is better for him out there in this world, but feels like it's not attainable to him because the fact that he doesn't have the quote unquote time to put into a lot of this development that goes on for other people. Well, I created this book for him. This is an easy way for you to get that development. It's an easy way for you to start putting time into yourself. And there are tools in here that I've used in my life so that I could improve who I was. And yes, I know where you come from because I was that blue collar guy. I still work hard and I did that growing up my whole life. And I came from a family of blue collar workers, and I pride myself on understanding the mindsets that we go through as people who grow up from that paycheck to paycheck life. The people who are just doing the best effort they can to put a roof over their family's head and to put food on the table. I understand the mindset, but understand now yourself that we can do more to benefit our own relationships with ourselves and with our families. This book is what I created because I wanted this to be addressed. It's the book I needed 6 years ago, and it's the book I hope you need today. So make sure you click the link below and go to designthemanwithin.com. Get your copy today so that you can start reading Design the Man Within. You can start getting the tools and you can start implementing them into your lives so you no longer have to suffer and struggle the way you have been. Make sure you guys go get Design the Man Within at designthemanwithin.com and join everybody else who's already ordered this book. Thanks.
Hey everyone, welcome back to YouTube. I wanted to address something here for all you guys that are watching. First, thank you everybody that's watching YouTube. Really appreciate it. Also, everybody that's subscribed, I appreciate that. Keep doing that. It means a lot to me, but also it means a lot more to, not more, it means the most to me, but it means a lot to the YouTube algorithm to start pushing us out so more people can listen and get the content, the free content as well. So ultimately, one of the first things that I wanted to go over was, where I started with the whole self-development space. Now, a lot of people, I don't know if you know this or if you've listened to a little bit of my backstory, but being former special operations, doing, protection for, half a decade. And then also, just the background of being a blue collar guy working with my hands. A dollar earned is from your blood, sweat, and tears, working hard. So kind of came from that lifestyle. Self-development was not something that was on my priority list, nor something I really believed in back, I don't know, maybe even like 7 years ago. I would tell you right now that, it was probably one of the things I would even criticize the most. And I find that with a lot of men that we are in that space of criticizing it. One, because of the fact that us picturing anybody that needs support and can't deal with their own stuff, especially us men coming from really alpha, high octane style backgrounds and alpha mindsets, we struggle with wanting to have support because we see it as weakness, right? We see it as emasculating. We see it as not being able to handle our own shit. And in a lot of cases, there's also this block of wanting support or wanting any type of person to give us a tool or technique at a certain age, because the fact that we should be able to do it all on our own, right? Like we're admitting that we're incapable of doing it on our own is part of this other conversation that's going on internally. So when I talk about this, I talk about it from a place of really knowing deeply what it's like to want to block any kind of development internally at a, man, this is probably my early 30s, so ultimately, I struggled with this. I struggled with self-development. I would criticize it. I would criticize people that were into it. I would just question them and be like, oh yeah, you're basically somebody who's weak-minded. You don't have the willpower and you don't have the mental strength to do things on your own and to have these real conversations of development internally. Now, I say all of that. Also, on the other side of it, being true to that story, then I would have to tell you the truth that I was also unwilling to have the real conversations and take ownership of where I was struggling internally, right? It's a it's a real beast in the sense of we can sit there and criticize people for doing it, but yet we aren't having the willpower and the strength to do it ourselves in the moments that we need it the most. So as I was really criticizing and not confronting my shadows, but criticizing the development space, criticizing men who were getting coaches or people who were getting coaches in general. It wasn't even just men. I would criticize women too that were getting coaches, because I would be like, what do you need a coach for? Like that's weak. Like, you got somebody that has no, also at the time thinking that the medical background would be the only thing that I could respect, but even wasn't willing to talk about therapy or go to therapy. But I was like, oh yeah, coaching, like that's totally not like something that's, helpful, and you're just paying into a scam, right? And so these were conversations that I was having with myself, and when I would hear the self-development stuff, because at the time my friend Taylor, who's now my wife, was in the self-development space. She was building her own business, not in self-development but in fitness. So she and I had a lot in common as friends, and then we had a lot in common dating as well when it came to those things. But she was far off on the self-development path as well, because that's where she had already drifted, and I was not even close to that. So to say the least, like, I would criticize this, have somebody in my life that was part of it, and I would see how positive she was in her life and her development, and she was receiving all these good things into her life. And yes, she was working for it, but yes, she was also manifesting it through how she perceived the world. And here I was, coming out of a failed marriage, having a divorce, not seeing really any positive benefits in my life, good things come into my life. And I was sitting there with judgment and negativity over not just kind of this development space and coaching space, but also in life in general. I was having a lot of judgment and negativity. And I know a lot of guys can resonate that, because it's part of our perception of protection. Like, we have to think of the worst case scenarios. We have to think all the negative things, because one, if we trust people, they're going to take advantage of us. And two, if we don't think about those things, we're going to end up leaving ourselves vulnerable to being taken advantage of. So there's a lot to that. And in other times, those protection mechanisms for our own mind, those protection mechanisms worked out to keep us safe. But at the end of the day, we're not in those environments anymore. So anyways, I drift off, but I was having this block on self-development. I was really struggling with my own life, and I was really struggling with my own development. And if we go back to Carl Jung talks about this. He talks about what the development as an adult is to confront our shadows. Well, I wasn't really doing that. I was making excuses on why I didn't need it, why there weren't shadows, why I didn't need to talk about those, why I didn't need to confront those internally. And then I was criticizing the people who were actually working on what Carl Jung recommended, which was to build yourself as an adult. And that's by confronting the shadows. So I was down this path of average. I was down this path of mediocrity. I was down this path of everybody else. And I wasn't looking at what could make me better, what could make me reach higher heights, what could help me to be successful in life. And I was struggling to attach to this mindset of what I was seeing from my friend at the time, and then, girlfriend soon after. But I was really struggling to see that. And as I was having these conversations with her, we weren't going too in depth with them. More or less, she'd mention things here or there, like something that she read. Then she would put on a podcast. Like, when we started dating, she'd be at my house, and I'd be like cooking dinner. At the time, I was doing bodybuilding, so I'd be prepping chicken breasts and freaking rice and broccoli and all this shit. And she would put on a podcast while I'd be like cooking all these massive stuff, a massive amount of stuff. And I'd be like, oh man, I wouldn't say anything, but I would listen, right? Like, and I would absorb the information. And that, on coupled with the fact of watching her grow and watching how her life was turning, I was like, oh, like, these started to really kind of bring down this wall, this barrier I had created against self-development and against all of this internal growth. And so she was having these conversations. We were listening to podcasts. I wasn't intensively listen to it as kind of a byproduct. And then I found out, or she had gone ahead and placed a book on my table. And this was called Excuses Be Gone by Dr. Wayne Dyer. If you've read it, you know how powerful it is. If you haven't read it, I recommend getting it. But I let it sit there for a couple months. I did not touch this book because I was still adamantly against self-development for myself and for anybody doing it, because again, I was referring to it as weakness. And I let it sit there, and I had just finished a book. Now, at the time, I was kind of reading books. I was reading books that were more like fiction, creating a movie in my mind about, like, David Baldacci's books or Dan Brown's books, if you've ever read them, really good fiction books. But I would sit there and read those, but I wasn't reading anything that was progressing myself as an individual or my knowledge base in any type of field, right? Like, I wasn't really expanding on that. I had already gotten 2 degrees. I think at this point I was almost done with my 3rd degree, or I was done with my 3rd degree. So reading was not something high on my list. It's like, I've done enough of this. I've done a lot of it for school. So anyways, I let the book sit there, Excuses Be Gone. And then I was just finished a book, and I picked it up, and I was like, man, let me just like read the beginning of this. So I started reading it, and I was like, holy shit. Like, it was a confronting book for me. And the way that Dr. Wayne Dyer writes is kind of like a punch in the stomach. It's this like face forward writing where it's like you don't have anywhere to run. And so when he wrote Excuses Be Gone, I started to read it, and I was like, oh shit. Like, not when he wrote it, he had written it quite a bit earlier, but I started to read Excuses Be Gone. And then I was like, man, all of this talk around self-development was my ego's way of protecting my insecurities. And it hit me. It was the light bulb moment for me in this whole progress of the individual growth, the introspection and confrontation of shadows, all kind of hit me. Now, I hadn't read any of Carl Jung's stuff at this time, so I didn't understand that whole point of it. That came later on. But this was the entrance for me into reframing the picture I had of self-development. Now, if I wouldn't have done this, if I wouldn't have had this epiphany, I wouldn't have seen self-development as a way not only to enhance my relationship with my now wife, Taylor, but also to enhance my relationship with myself, to provide forgiveness for myself for things that I'm not proud of, to also then provide growth for myself for the shadows that I do see within me that I need to confront, to help improve my life, my ability to love who I am, but also the tranquility, peace, and enjoyment I get from life. All of that has come from the fact of understanding the simple piece of personal development. Now, I know how much guys are adamant against this, but at the end of the day, the only reason you're adamant against it is because you're stuck exactly where I was years ago. And that was the place of really having this protection mechanism from the ego to say your insecurities will leave you so vulnerable that you're going to be taken advantage of. And at the bottom of that is some kind of wound, some kind of exposure to vulnerability that happened in your past that could hurt you or did hurt you in that moment, whether emotionally or physically, however it manifested itself. But at the end of the day, we have a story behind it that's confirming our ego's ability to want to protect our insecurity. And I say all of this because if you would have told me 7 years ago, or maybe that was like 6 years ago, like, hey, you're going to be on a path where you're trying to influence men to take better looks internally at themselves, and you're going to be coaching them on this, you're going to be helping them develop into a person who can process their own shadows. Well, I would have been like, get the fuck out of here. No, I'm not. That's not even a real thing. Those guys are weak people. Why would I want to be around them? Well, because at the time I was also very weak. I was actually the weak one, not people that were in the self-development space. I was the weak one. And that the whole point was the fact that all my negativity, my judgment about the external world and about the internal world was all about protecting insecurities. And there was no place for it, because at the end of the day, I wasn't receiving the results I wanted. So I also came to the conclusion that first, my insecurities were being protected by my ego, and the internal confrontation needed to happen through a lot of things that I felt I was strong in or felt I was good at. Those were the things that I actually needed to confront. And then the second thing about this was the awareness of just understanding that negativity is not a positive influence for anything in your life. You're not going to receive the good things that you want in your life by being negative. You're going to receive the good things you want in life by seeing it with a different perception. And the only way to switch that is to attack the shadow, is to take forward this fight to the shadow within, and allow yourself to gain tools from coaches, to gain tools from people in the self-development space, because that is all going to improve your ability to have these confrontational internal conversations that are going to expand your experience in life, but also expand your consciousness and awareness. And it's going to improve your relationships. And I can't say that enough. It's not just going to improve your relationships externally, it's going to improve your relationships internally. It's going to give you the ability to have a different conversation around things and question yourself when you're starting to bring in negative scenarios again into your life. It's going to allow you to question that, process it, and move through it. But you can't do it just by thinking that you're going to muscle through this stuff. I thought I could just muscle through it. I thought I could stick it out. And yes, that serves a purpose in certain areas of your life. It will work in entrepreneurship. It will work in special operations. It will work in very hard blue collar jobs, but it's not going to work in the psychology of your mind. It's not going to work in the subconscious and prefrontal cortexes where we are prefrontal cortex, where we have the ability to constantly repeat stories if they are not handled correctly. And that is what we are doing. So I wanted to be able to stop repeating the same stories that were causing the things I didn't want in life to happen. And in all of that, I was able to finally step forward into personal development. And it has been nothing but a positive thing for me. Now, yes, I still go through moments of negativity. I still go through moments of judgment, but I have the ability now to question those things. And I didn't have that before. I have the ability to change that narrative and to change the path I'm on later down in life. And what I receive from the universe, from God, from everything that I'm, energetically conversing with. And so I challenge all men out there to question why you're so protective of your insecurities, and what is that protection of your insecurities blocking you from? That is something that, if you really ask yourself that, you're going to realize that you're being blocked from the life you actually want by pretending that if you keep doing things the same way, you're going to receive the life that you want. You're not. If nothing changes, nothing changes. You're going to keep getting the same thing over and over and over. So have that question. And if you're ready to jump into coaching and you're ready to have somebody help guide you and give you the tools, go ahead and DM me over on Instagram at johnny.elsasser. Let me know. I'm open to having a conversation with you, even if it's not with me and it's with somebody else. I don't care. I want to see you guys do better in life so you can have the life that you want. But reach out to me. We can get on a clarity call, talk about this shit, and figure out where you're at and how we can get you to where you want to be. And the same thing is, if you go to johnnyelsasser.com, you can find that I do one-on-one coaching there as well. You can click that, book a call, and we can get on a clarity call and talk about where you are. So hopefully this opens the door to let you know that you're not alone if you're blocking yourself. I was there. And also the fact that there is a different path. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see y'all next week.